Welcome back to the Fantasy Trading Room, hosted by Face Off Sports Network. And today I'm joined by my good friend Alex Caruso. Alex, thank you so much for coming on this early morning. I really appreciate it. How you been?
Steve, I've been wonderful. I'm so happy that the NFL is here. We're in full swing mode right now. I could not just be happier to see football being played. I can't wait to see how many takes I get wrong, how many I get right. It's been a beautiful start, and I feel like there's only going to be so much more goodness. Like we are only 2 weeks in, and we still have another 15 or 16 to go.
Yeah, it's been crazy for sure. It just seemed like a few weeks ago we were down at the expo talking about I can't wait for football to finally start, and now we're kind of just thrust into that chaos. So, what's it been like for you? I know you're primarily a Twitter creator. How has that beginning of the year been like? What are you focused on the most in the early stages of the season on Twitter?
Yeah, I think right now it's just trying to give people as much new information as possible. Like I think people were tired of me seeing like tweeting out the same stats over and over for the whole offseason, just trying to give people new information and trying to see people that were getting the same things and seeing it on their timeline. But it's been really awesome because now every week we get this chance to share like so much new data and so many new stats with people. And that's probably been my favorite part is just because every week is unique. There's always new stats coming out. There's always new players that are changing roles on teams, and as injuries come in, like there's just so much to give people for fantasy content. So as a Twitter content creator, primarily like it's been really fun just to be able to give people a lot of new information that's not the same old off-season stuff you hear a million times.
Yeah, I was gonna say I use a ton of your stats and all that. I think we have some very similar takes, so this episode should be interesting. But right, once you get in the season, it's like you finally have everything changes every week, and you finally it's like you can spend all season talking about your flag plants and putting all that data in. But once you get to the season, who knows that Puka Nakua is going to have double Jamar Chase's fantasy points, you know? So
It's
besides that,
crazy.
before we hop in, what else are you making content in season? And just tell everyone where they can find all your work because great
Yeah.
work, my man.
Absolutely. I You can find me on Twitter at Alex Caruso. Otherwise, if you like player props, if you like anything sports betting related, you can subscribe to my newsletter, The Daily Prop. Give out player props in your inbox every single day, full write-ups, all in 3 minutes or less.
Awesome. Sounds great. Let's hop into some buy, sells, or holds. Let's start with some running backs just quickly. Let's start with Jamir Gibbs. So Gibbs has had a slow start to the season, but especially in week 3, David Montgomery is now injured. So are you looking to buy Gibbs low if you can? And do you think he's going to see a massive increase in his workload now that David Montgomery is out?
I don't think he's ever going to see a massive increase in workload. I mean, dating back to college at Georgia Tech, he never saw more than 35% of his team's carries over a full season. So I don't think that he's ever going to be like this like mega between the tackles runner. I think what we saw last week where he had 16 touches and 9 targets is probably going to be pretty on par with what he sees for the season. Maybe he gets up to the 20 touch range when David Montgomery's out. But I definitely am going to be buying him if I can, if at all, because when you see a running back get 9 targets in their second career game. And you have Jameson Williams, who's shown nothing on an NFL field and has gotten suspended. Amon-Ra St. Brown is dealing with a turf toe. I mean, Sam Laporta is still a rookie. David Montgomery's missing. Like, all of a sudden, like, you get this scenario where Jamir Gibbs, like, ends up leading this team in targets. So I'm definitely going to be buying him if there is a buy low window. But I know with David Montgomery out, not a lot of people are trying to give him up right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what you said about how he's not necessarily getting every touch in the backfield kind of put me off him early on in the season where people were, for some reason, expecting him to get the goal line work, every touch in the backfield, and just to become the next, prime Adrian Peterson or an elite bell cow. But now that we kind of see that he's not getting every touch, it kind of lowers expectations. But he's looked great when he's played and touches the ball. So I think now if you can buy him low, I would definitely do so. He should see a ton more volume and opportunities, now that it's progressing on later in the season. I know Rashard White, I think we have a very similar take. He just destroyed my Bears last week. So what are your thoughts on his outlook in week 3 and rest of the season right now?
I think the really interesting thing about him is like I think there was like I definitely was questioning week 1 after he wasn't efficient. but he's averaging over 20 touches a game right now, and running backs to do that over a full season finish as a top 12 running back 100% of the time. So like, he keeps up this volume regardless of who he's playing. The Bears are the toughest run defense in the league. Like, this volume always wins out, like, historically in fantasy football. But right now, he's playing one of the most elite roles in the league. He is the only running back in the NFL with 100% of the goal line work, and he's being in on over 60% of his team's pass attempts or pass plays, excuse me. Like, that is like, he's the only running back to be doing that right now. Doesn't mean that like he has the most elite Christian McCaffrey type role, but he's seeing as good of a role as any running back in the league right now. I don't know if there's really a buy window. I'd be buying if people can. Otherwise, you got to hold him and just see what happens, because I think that the upside in that role is really all you need to be knowing right now. And if it hits, great. If it doesn't, oh well, you didn't spend an insane draft capital on him.
Rashard White is a player I love this past season. I mean, Leonard Fournette was injured a few times last year, and every time he wasn't playing, it seemed like Rashard White would just dominate based on volume alone. I mean, he wasn't necessarily the most efficient back. I'm not saying he's a elite first-round talent like Bijan Robinson or Jamir Gibbs, but he's getting almost every touch in this backfield because, I mean, who else do they have? Chase Edmonds, who is completely cooked. Sean Tucker is – I kind of like him as a prospect, but it seemed like he was dealing with some injuries leading up. He's definitely going to need a lot more time, and I doubt he even gets a role this season. But yeah, again, I mean, like you said, he's getting all that work, so volume wins out. Again, I don't think the Bears are the best test since oh my God, they are awful. Like, he just he looked like Christian McCaffrey against the Bears last week. But I think nonetheless, he's improving. I don't know why people are saying that because he wasn't very efficient in 3 games last year. When he had a full workload, that means that he's not going to be good at all. But yeah, glad we're on the same page with Rashard White. Really like White. What do you think about Amari Cooper? He's kind of been banged up. Deshaun Watson hasn't quite looked like what we thought he'd look like. But nonetheless, he's had a solid start to the year. Are you buying him when you can, or are you kind of off him now that Watson doesn't look very good?
I think I have to be buying him. I mean, just because there aren't a lot of main targets in this offense, they might pass a little bit more without Nick Chubb. I saw something today. I would have been off Amari Cooper, I'll be honest, until I saw someone posted today that Amari Cooper right now is seeing the highest target per route run rate of his career. So because of this super condensed offense, they're actually like throwing to him at like a ridiculous rate right now, which to me says that like we should probably be buying this guy, and he's someone that we should be interested in because he really is like the focal point of this offense. And for me, that's all I need to know to be buying a player like that, because if he's the focal point and he's going to be the lead guy in a team that's passing a lot more than some other teams, he's definitely someone that I will be keeping an eye on.
Well, yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't know that at all. It seemed like he was getting a majority of the work because the Browns don't really look great. And yeah, like you said, Nick Chubb is out. I mean, Jerome Ford's not bad, but just by nature, they're always going to pass the ball more when they can't give the ball to a top 5 running back in the league. So I think there's a case to be had that Amari Cooper could break fantasy football if Deshaun Watson, he's hitting that time where if he's going to break out, it's going to be in the next few weeks. If he can get to that elite level Houston Texan Deshaun Watson that we once saw, I think Amari Cooper could easily be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy, especially if you're getting every target with an elite quarterback. And even if not, he can just return value as he's in a pretty good offense and getting a ton of targets. So what do you think about Michael Pittman? I like Pittman this offseason just based on volume alone. Anthony Richardson hasn't looked bad at all. So what are your thoughts on Pittman for this week and the rest of the season?
I think that Michael Pittman is someone I would be selling personally, just because I think they're going to be a low volume passing team with Anthony Richardson. Like, we've seen a little bit more of a pass rate above expected, but as we historically have seen with any running quarterback teams outside of like the Bills, but like the Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson type teams, like they're never super high in passing volume, which I think would hurt Pittman over a full season. But right now he's the wide receiver 6. I mean, all I'm saying is if you can sell Michael Pittman for an AJ Brown or Jamar Chase or someone just ridiculous like that because of how well he's been playing, I would do it. If Gardner Minshew is the quarterback for the whole season, I would say hold them because they're going to end up having to pass a lot more. but the running ability of Anthony Richardson allows them to be able to not have to throw the ball as much and not have to rely on these younger receivers. So I think Michael Pittman is probably a hold for me, actually. But if you can sell him for a Jamar Chase or an A.J. Brown or someone that's really struggling early, I'd be doing it.
Right, I agree. I think he's a hold for me as well. I have Pittman, and if I've been trying to sell him relatively high because he's had a great first few weeks. I'm not sure that that's going to be predictive every single week going forward. I think Richardson is going to see some inconsistencies, but like this week, he's ranked as like the wide receiver 28, and I feel like he's honestly getting pretty disrespected. So it doesn't really seem like there's a sell high window for most of the community. And if you're able to get him at that price, because people are, oh, Anthony Richardson is out, he's always getting hurt, all that. I think I would honestly buy him at the wide receiver 28 cost because he's still getting about 10 to 12 targets every single week. The Colts really don't have much else going on, and Richardson is looking a lot better than I initially expected. I thought it was going to be a train wreck, to be honest. He was, not very efficient in college, and now he steps in the NFL, and he looks very serviceable. So, like you said, if you're getting him at wide receiver 28 plus range, I think that's a buy. But just based on where he should be generally going, I think you should either be holding him or selling him high.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a really good way to look at it because it's all relative in fantasy, whether or not, like whether you're going to buy or sell. Like it depends on your league format, your teams, where you can actually sell people for or where you don't. If you're in a league that you can't make a lot of trades, not a lot of volume. But if you're in a trade that is super biased, super like everything changes week to week, I think that's the spot that you can look to.
Right. That's a great point. If your league market is very up and down and you're seeing Pittman 28 and 13 points, I think go and sell him. But what do you think about Kyle Pitts? Kyle Pitts is disappointing once again. And I was in on him last year. He was very, very disappointing. And I think I have to be out on him this year and just at all going forward. Arthur Smith refuses to throw the ball to him for whatever reason. Drake London, I know, had a decent game, but I don't think you can count on them on a week-to-week basis based on the fact that there's going to be times where Arthur Smith is going to pass the ball, 20 times and run the ball 35 times. So what do you think? What do you think about Kyle Pitts right now?
Yeah, Kyle Pitts is someone I'm definitely worried about. I don't think you can really sell him because no one wants to buy Kyle Pitts. I think I'd be waiting for the first moment that you can actually like be able to have a good week with him where there is hope for optimism, and maybe I'd be selling him. But I think it's the same thing with him, same thing with Drake London, same thing I talked about with Michael Pittman is that like these low volume passing offenses, you're going to have explosion weeks that look really good. But for the most part, like there's going to be some inconsistency and there's going to be some things missing on a week to week basis that you just can't trust with these offenses. So I think that, again, the second there is a sell high window like we saw with Drake London for this week, I'd be taking it. I'm not knocking the talent. If Kyle Pitts was on a team like the Chiefs or the Bills, he'd be a top 3 tight end for me behind only Andrews and Kittle. But just because of the offense itself and them throwing 25 pass attempts per game, I have to be out on them.
100%. Yeah, I really like Kyle Pitts as a prospect. I thought after that great rookie season, he was going to dominate in year 2, but Arthur Smith apparently had other plans. Like you said, I mean, you have to wait for him to break out because what can you really sell him for? But I don't even view him as a top 12 tight end going forward. If people are still kind of stuck on that name recognition and are like, oh, well, he was an amazing prospect, I think he is a low-end tight end one. Even at that price, I'm selling him. I am completely out on him. There's just probably going to be 1 to 2 times maybe where he scores over 10 points. I'm out on Kyle Pitts. I'm selling him for basically whatever I can get right now. And what do you think about Hunter Henry, who I was kind of surprised to see the Patriots are throwing the ball a ton this year? I think Mac Jones is a solid quarterback, but with our new offensive coordinator, it seems like they're really dialing in on Hunter Henry. And it seems like he's very viable with how good Mac Jones has looked and how much the Patriots are passing the ball, which is pretty surprising.
Yeah, this is definitely a new offense than we've seen in the past from them, which I think is like the really beautiful thing about all this because like last year we saw this super slow, super archaic looking offense that refused to ever pass the ball at like anything close to a high rate. So I think now that we're actually seeing a team that is passing the ball at a high rate, They're able to like make plays and convert on third downs. Like that's really good for this whole offense. And I think Hunter Henry has not only just like been like a good tight end, like he's actually playing the role we thought Mike Gesicki would play, which is the role that I was trying to target for fantasy football, where Hunter Henry is like in the slot for a lot of his snaps. I think he's led this team in slot snaps, just really great for a tight end. And again, as long as his offense continues to look something like a a mediocre or better offense, then it's really good for Hunter Henry. Him and Zach Ertz are definitely the guys that I'm trying to target right now the most. Zach Ertz probably the target that you can find on waiver wires still in over 50% of your leagues. So those are the two guys right now at tight end that have been really, really surprising so far.
Yeah, I just picked up both in some of my leagues. I mean, neither are really very exciting plays. I thought Hunter Henry was going to be playing behind Mike Gesicki, honestly. Like you said, it kind of made sense that he would be used more on the slots and he's more athletic, but Hunter Henry has looked very good in these first few weeks. He's getting utilized a lot. And then, Zach Ertz has looked pretty solid as well. I mean, he's had 10 targets week 1, 8 targets week 2, and Josh Dobbs surprised everyone and looked, halfway decent in week 2. So if he can keep that up, I think Ertz is going to, be a viable tight end 1 in the low end every single week. Again, they probably don't have the upside like, a George Kittle, Darren Waller, Dallas Goedert because they're not in good offenses. But tight end is such a crapshoot that if you can get a guy that's going to put up 8 to 10 weeks on a weekly basis, that's very valuable versus, having to roster a guy like Kyle Pitts or Gerald Everett where you're just throwing stuff and sometimes they're going to get, 11 points. Other times they're going to put up 3.5 on an offense.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. And that's what it all comes down to. Anytime you can find consistency as far as targets go, like that is immediately where I'm trying to put my fantasy football brain to.
100%. Let's dive into some running back rankings. Just let me know your thoughts for week 3. I know we've been absolutely decimated by injuries. No Nick Chubb, no Saquon Barkley, no Austin Eckler. So, I mean, this looks a whole lot different than the start of the season. Who are some guys you're kind of higher on now that the season has went on, but who are some guys that you really just don't like and think are overvalued as well this week?
What I think as far as this week specifically goes, I will not be a Jerome Ford guy. I know that like Jerome, like the Titans have not faced any like amazing running backs. They faced Jamal Williams in week 1, Joshua Kelly in week 2, but they made both of those guys look like really mediocre running backs, and there just wasn't a lot of room. Like the Titans have an awesome front 7, but one of the worst secondaries in all of football. And I think that the Browns are going to try to expose their secondary the same way the Chargers did. And I don't think this is going to be a Jerome Ford week. I think there are going to be Jerome Ford weeks to be had. And I think that maybe he could be a buy low after this week. But I don't think that he's going to be really productive, even though he's going to have a really big role. Someone I love for this week is definitely Kyren Williams. I mean, Kyren Williams saw a 95% snap share, 87% of the routes. This past week, you saw the goal line carries. He's on pace for like 34 touchdowns this year. So again, just anybody that's going to be on the field for every snap is someone I'm buying for fantasy football. Someone I'm watching and trying to keep an eye on would be Zach Moss. I mean, he played all but 1 snap this past week, and I think that he might not have a great game against the Ravens this week, but if he does have a bad game, I'm buying him immediately. We've seen no signs that Jonathan Taylor for sure is going to be back for week 5, and we get a guy that's playing an insane snap share that could be the running back 1 for the rest of the season. The haters can say, oh, well, he's not going to be Zach Moss. Well, the last 4 games of last season, when Zach Moss was healthy, Zach Moss was the guy. As long as Jonathan Taylor is out, I think that Moss continues to keep that role.
Yeah, if you can pick up Zach Moss or trade him for basically nothing, I would 100% do so. I think he does have a rough matchup this week. He's being basically viewed outside the top 24, but he's like very good so far, so I had to sneak him in at 24. Jerome Ford, I don't mind this week, mainly because I don't think Kareem Hunt is going to play a role at all, considering he just got there. It's a good point. It's not a great matchup against the Titans, but at the same time, these running backs at this point, you're really dealing with a whole bunch of guys that have just either don't have the volume or don't really have the talent. So it seems like Ford is going to have some volume this week with no Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt isn't going to be in this offense too much, I would assume. And he looked pretty good in, last week in what he had. I mean, he had 25 fantasy points. I'm not saying he's going to get back to that this week, but even if he takes a step down and can get up to, 14 points, with Brown's offense that should be improving, I don't mind that. And Kyron Williams is a player I really like as well. I really think it's great how you mentioned the volume. And that's what I agree with as well. You should really be chasing volume. It's like basically one of the only things that you can actually control and project in fantasy football. So if he had 80 snaps last week. Out of 80 snaps, I believe he had 76. And he's getting all the passing work. The Rams are going up against the Bengals. And if Joe Burrow doesn't play, I think this should be a close game. But the Rams are still not great. Their defense is still pretty bad. They'll probably still be trailing. I believe they are 2.5-point underdogs right now, and it's kind of baked in that Joe Burrow won't play. But let's talk about some wide receiver rankings as well for week 3. I mean, really, anything else that stands out? I have A.J. Brown all the way down here at 9. And what about Garrett Wilson? I have him at 22, and it seems like with Zach Wilson, there's just so much debate to be had where he's such a good player, but the situation around him right now is just god-awful.
Yeah, I think that Garrett Wilson, again, is someone that is going to end up falling perfectly in line with a Drake London or a Christian Watson, where just mega talented receivers that are stuck in really bad offenses. Like if we could go back to last year right now and get a Mike White or Joe Flacco back, where they're just gonna chuck the crap out of the ball every single week. I'd feel really good about that for Garrett Wilson. But Zach Wilson does not throw the ball down the field. He has not been accurate, and every week we're just gonna be hoping we see another 70-yard breakaway touchdown like we saw from Garrett Wilson this past week. I'm rooting for him. I hope they bring somebody else in. But as long as he's out, he's going to end up in that mid-20s range for me every single week, where you're just hoping and praying that he finds some work. But it's going to be pretty ugly week to week as whether or not that we're actually going to see a lot of production.
Yeah, and I mean, I upload these rankings before the 49ers game, and I look pretty dumb having Deebo Samuel ranked at 20 after he kind of had an explosion. Do you think that's going to continue for the rest of the season? I mean, I was kind of off Deebo. It really looked like Ayuk was going to be the guy, but I mean, he looked awesome against the Giants. So what are you thinking about Deebo Samuel for the rest of the season right now?
Yeah, I think he's a tough one for me. I think that if I had to be honest, I don't think that he's going to if I could sell him for a top 12 wide receiver right now, I would. I'm not saying I hate Deebo. I'm not saying he's going to be bad, but the same thing we've been talking, the theme of this episode for me is just there are certain guys that are going to be really productive some weeks that might not do that the whole season. The same way that we've seen with George Kittle so far, we've seen with Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey. This offense has so many mouths to feed, and they're not going to be able to put up 30 points every single week that they're playing. And when you have someone like Brandon Ayuk, we saw what he did week 1 when he was healthy. We've seen what Christian McCaffrey is doing every week when he's healthy. And then you still have Deebo and George Kittle. I just think that this offense, when everyone is playing, is going to be inconsistent. If Brandon Ayuk was going to miss a lot more weeks, then Deebo Samuel's a top 12 wide receiver every week that he's out or one of the big four is out. But when the big four play, we're going to see a lot of inconsistency, and a lot of whatever the other opposing defense gives us is probably going to be the guy that's going to produce the most.
Totally agree. I think the 49ers, again, like you said, these guys are all very talented, but it's really hard to bump these guys much higher than, a wide receiver 2 or, it's hard to expect George Kittle to be an elite level top tight end like TJ Hawkinson, Travis Kelce every week, considering there's so many other guys in this offense that are getting work. But if Brandon Ayuk, he was kind of lingering with that injury. I mean, if there's guys that don't miss, I feel like they're all very talented to where if their situation changes, they have to go up dramatically into a top 12 wide receiver in Deebo Samuel's case. But I mean, you can't really depend on that. So if you can sell Deebo Samuel, people are saying oh, prime Deebo Samuel's back. If you can sell him for what people are paying prime Deebo Samuel, 100% go do that right now. But let's dive into some tight ends. I mean, we kind of have, so this is a little bit of a hot take right now. I got TJ Hawkinson at 1 above Travis Kelce. I mean, they're in the same tier. I can't be wow, you really 100% need to have Hawkinson above Kelce. I understand that probably fundamentally doesn't make too much sense. But let me get your thoughts before I have to back myself up on why I have Hawkinson as the tight end 1 this week.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what you have to say. I mean, again, Hawkinson is as close as it gets. Like, I think that there's a really big gap between this between tier 2 and tier 3. Travis Kelce to me still far and away the number one tight end. I think he's going to be healthy. It seems like from all the injury experts are saying low risk of a re-injury to the knee, should be 100% by this week or next week. After that, it's Hawkinson and Mark Andrews in a tier of their own by far. Tier 3 is everyone else, but like the top 2 tiers are clearly Andrews and Hawkinson, and then a little bit above them is Travis Kelce. After that, everybody else. So I don't hate Hawkinson being in the tier 1. I just think that Travis Kelce is consistently showing just a little bit of a step above him, but I'd love to hear your argument.
So for the rest of the season, I 100% have Kelce tier 1. Then I have Hawkinson tier 2, and depending on the week, I'd probably have him mixed in with Andrews or even just Kelce, Hawkinson, then Andrews. But this week, I feel like everything lines up. I'm, first off, the biggest TJ Hawkinson fan. The whole offseason, I've been accused of being TJ Hawkinson's burner account on Twitter and all these social medias with how much I've been pushing the pro-Hawkinson agenda. And he's looked fantastic. I mean, he had 25 points last week, but it's just the matchups. I mean, he's going up against the Chargers, this should be the highest scoring game of the week. He looked fantastic. He had 25 points on 2 touchdowns last week. And now he's playing in a game where both offenses are amazing. Both defenses are terrible. He has even more touchdown upside than last week. And they're going to be putting up a lot of points. Hawkinson is commanding a ton of volume. I think Addison has looked good, but he's also had kind of 2 fluky deep touchdowns. So I expect him to go down, which should inherently help Hawkinson. And with Kelce, it's just that he's playing the Bears. I'm a Bears fan, and they should just absolutely blow the Bears out of the water immediately. The Bears stand no chance, and I don't really think they're going to need to push Travis Kelce or have him too involved. And I think they're going to give the ball to Isaiah Pacheco a ton because they'll be up. They're not really going to need it, and Kelce is still kind of fresh off that injury. So if they don't need to game plan Kelce into that, role like they do every other week, just because of the Bears are probably going to be a bottom 3 team in the NFL. That's just my reasoning. I feel like they're not going to have to rely on him, and Hawkinson is in a shootout. So I honestly think that Hawkinson could very well outscore Kelce this week. But again, rest of the season, I think I have Kelce there, Hawkinson. But for this week, I'm going to go with a bold take and put Hawk at 1.
I love that. No, that's a completely fair take. Really good argument for that.
It's not really too much other guys. We kind of touched on having Zach Ertz here. I mean, nothing else really stands out. It's kind of crazy, in my opinion, that Hunter Henry is the tight end 5 this week. But, there's just not much else in this landscape. I guess we should touch on Sam Laporta real quick before we end off with the QBs. Sam Laporta is breaking the stigma that rookie tight ends can't produce. I know, I've seen your tweets, and it's very true that Dalton Kincaid in particular is being kind of overdrafted because they're not going to produce at a high rate year 1. What are your thoughts on that, considering that the data says that rookie tight ends don't produce in year 1?
Report is revelation. I mean, for him, what we've seen so far, 450 tight ends drafted since 2000. Just 2 of them were top 12 tight ends in fantasy points per game that were not drafted in round 1. That's 1 every 11 and a half years, and Sam Laporta is on pace to do it. It is awesome to see. He doesn't have a lot of target competition, and they're using him on the field. So I don't think that this is at this point a massive, you should be selling high on him because he's not going to do it. How much this team throws the ball, the injuries in this team definitely gives him a path to keep producing week in and week out.
Yeah, I like Sam Laporta, but like you said, I was kind of seeing the same things that you were saying, these guys don't produce. So I was cautiously optimistic. I was grabbing him late in drafts, hoping that near the end of the season he would have more of a role because he has the talent. He's a pretty good situation with the Lions, but he's exceeding expectations. And let's just go over a few quarterback rankings before we wrap things up. I mean, there's really not much else to say. We have these top 5 guys, and Justin Fields has looked terrible. Are you panicking on Justin Fields yet in redraft because he still has that great rushing upside?
I think you just have to continue to hold out hope. Like this offense has looked like the biggest mess we've like ever seen from an NFL team, which means it can't really get much worse at this point. And he's put up 15 and 16 points, which is like not great for a quarterback and not what you drafted him for. But like I don't think he could have played any worse, and you can still see the super high 15-point floor. So I think that's the really nice part of it. Like I think that DJ Moore has to help this offense. Them getting all these weapons back have to help. I think the rushing is going to come. So I think if you could sell like a Kirk Cousins for Justin Fields or a Tua for Justin Fields, I think I would be doing it still. Because I still believe in Justin Fields and that nuclear type rushing upside that we saw last year where he finishes a top 10 QB in 9 of his last 10 games. I think that's the Justin Fields I'm going to continue to buy. And we've seen, if anything, this is a super high floor, but definitely some reason to worry.
You say it can't get much worse, but as a Bears fan, I will tell you there's always a way this organization can make things worse. You think it can't get worse, and then they lose their defensive coordinator a few days after, just as an example. But, I mean, good point. I agree. I think Fields is still, for fantasy this year, he's a buy for me. Like you said, he looked terrible and still had 14 fantasy points. He's going to run the ball a lot more because he's going to be forced to. He's not able to find success through the air, so ultimately, once everyone realizes that, he's going to be forced to turn the ground. But I don't want to take too much more of your time. Again, thank you so much for coming on. If you want to plug anything else before we wrap this up, but thank you so much, Alex. It's always great talking fantasy with you, and I really appreciate you coming on and everything.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I'm really, really happy to take the time. It was a fantastic show. I love getting to talk ball with you always. But I think you can find me, Alex Caruso on Twitter, fantasy football stuff coming out each and every single day. But again, if you like the player prop stuff, don't forget to subscribe to my newsletter, The Daily Prop. It's the first link in my Twitter bio right now. We have hit 17 of our last 19 player props on like the most unreal run right now, trying to spend hours upon hours in the lab, cooking up good plays for the people. So don't forget to check that out if you like player props.
Well, if you don't want money, then don't go follow Alex Player Props, but I'm assuming you do, so please go check his player props out. He does some great work on Twitter. Be sure to follow him there. But again, thank you so much for coming on, and that's going to wrap up this episode of the Fantasy Trader.